Okay, welcome back to the channel. This one I'm excited about because I've been talking about it for quite a while, and it's taken me a little while just to get all the information together. And I want to do it in such a way that it's easy to understand. It's easy for me to read documents and go, yeah, I get that. But to then verbally convey that to you as the audience is where the difficulty comes in. So to start with, I want to tell you a story, and I want to tell you a story about when I kept tropical fish, and I had a dream fish that I wanted to keep, and it was a goonch catfish. And I don't know if you know what that is, feel free to go away and Google it. It's like a massive, great big catfish that in the Indian river systems where they come from, they're renowned for eating the dead bodies when they do the burial ritual. So there's this type of catfish, but they're notoriously difficult. I didn't want to, they grow to 2 meters long, right? So I didn't want to just buy an adult. I wanted to grow one up. So I knew I could source them. I could get the baby fish. The problem is they die, and they die very easily. So I didn't want to invest an amount of money into this catfish and then it die on me. So I took a military approach of doing for want of a better word, a map recce of the area that they come from. And what I learned from that is that, as you would suspect, young fish stick to the shallows because the bigger fish then can't get to them and predate on them. So the young fish stay in the shallow pools. Shallow pools are warmed up by the sun, and then so the warmer water, and then as they get bigger they slowly migrate further and further back into the main river. The main river is fed from mountains. The mountains are fed from snow off the top of the caps, so the water running through the main river system is cold. And we knew this. We knew that babies did well in one environment but then suddenly died when you transitioned them to the next environment, or they wouldn't do well in the cold, but adults really like the cold. So it had to be a transitional process. And it took me 12 to 18 months of keeping this fish in a specially designed cube tank that was only 10 inches deep. And then in there was rocky formations. And then I had high powered internal pumps, no external filtration, all internal filtration. And then basically formed little rock pools within this tank. Kept it so it got the morning sun through the window, and that was its only heat source. So it got the morning sun warmed up, and then through the evening cooled down, and the fish did fine. And then when it outgrew that tank, then I moved it into a large tank. I purchased a massive tank and then built a shed around it. But I kept it outside, and at the time I lived in South Wales, which in the UK is very wet, cold and windy, and I didn't put any additional heating on it. I left it natural. I had high power pumps on one end pushing it through. That fish did absolutely amazing. And when I sold the fish, because I decided I was going to get back into reptiles, when I sold the fish setup, I sold the entirety. The shed, the tank, the fish, the whole lot went, because the person who wanted it wanted to continue with that. It was a 2-year project that I spent probably 18 months, if not longer, just investigating the microclimate of where that fish comes from. And that's the importance, is the microclimate. Every time we bring an animal into our house, we create a microclimate for it. However, for me personally, what I see is the information we give out is not based on microclimate. The information we give out is based on general climate. So for example, Grande Terre, the main, I'm sure I'm saying that right, Grande Terre, the main islands of New Caledonia, if we went off the care sheets, this is just luscious rainforest, and it's really not. The island is 250 plus kilometers long from one end to the other, and it runs from southeast to northwest. And in that area, it's 50 kilometers wide. It has mountain ranges, it has rainforest, it has savanna, has open plainland. It's susceptible to many different weather formations, that no one area is the same. So when we say keep one new cow gecko this way, keep another new cow gecko exactly the same, it's false information. It has to be false information, because they don't all come from the same area. And that's what I want to dig into today. So what I'm not here to do is say so-and-so's doing it right, so-and-so's doing it wrong, and their way doesn't work, or their way works and their way doesn't. What I'm trying to do is explain my approach to it, and what I think should be everybody's, not necessarily everybody's approach, but everybody's thought process when they come down to it. So, in true military style, welcome to my map. Not to scale, and definitely not accurate in terms of shape. All right, I've tried to get as much information on here as I can, mainly for me and my madness. So try to picture the real place. Okay. In map terms, in the military, we would always give a key. So the key you've got is the large orange areas are savanna. Now, savanna in New Caledonia is not savanna like you would expect in Africa, okay? It's not going to be wide open sub-Sahara savanna lands, big grass plains. What savanna means in New Caledonia is shrubs and trees, but a low canopy level, quite open, allowing airflow to go around, okay? And then what you've got, the large white areas, these are marquis shrublands, all right? So these have again, more plants, more shrubs, slightly more denser than the savanna areas, right? So picture your sort of standard sort of woodlands, but quite open. And then the last thing you can see on here, color-wise, is the green patches. Now these are rainforests. Now what I've not done is I've not made it look different between thick rainforest and just rainforest. Okay, so there is two types of rainforest in New Caledonia. I've just included them in one because the two rainforests are always found together, right? So some of it is slightly sparse, what I would call secondary rainforest, and then some of it's primary rainforest, which is dense jungle. Okay, you've got some patches here. This is a large lake system, this is a bit of wetland, and then the other thing is this pinky purple cross section right the way across. Now this is online the spread of gargoyle geckos. Okay, so just from a visual aspect, you can see that actually their area, very little tropical in there. Okay, so that's the map. All right, 50 kilometers wide, it's about 250 kilometers long. You've got two high peaks, and I apologize if I butcher any of this. You've got Mount Penny, which is the highest one, around 1600 meters. You've got a mountain range then that runs sort of across the eastern side. So when we say the eastern side of New Caledonia, we are talking about this side of New Caledonia, and this being the western, even though it runs from southeast to northwest. Okay, Australia is about 1200 kilometers that way. Okay, so here's some things to understand about New Caledonia. It's in itself is a microclimate. Okay, it's in the tropics, but the whole island is not tropical. It it gets harsh weather coming in from the east to west, all right? And this is from the trade winds. And these are the winds that blow in from the ocean, and they carry with them large weather formations like cyclones and hurricanes and stuff like that. Now, what you find on New Caledonia is actually as these weather patterns come in, they hit this mountain range that runs along the eastern edge and then dissipate or move around. So you see these arrows sort of pushing the wind up. Some will whip round the bottom. This is Pine Island. Pine Island is not affected because it doesn't have the elevation, okay? Pine Island is largely tropical, so we're not going to talk about that yet. So, you've got these large weather formations that come in, and then on top of that, then you've got two weather formations that, without going into too much detail, basically affect what's happening in the Asia Pacific and then the Americas, and these are the El Nino and the La Nina, right? So, and they are a series of high pressure and low pressure. So if you've got El Nino playing effect, you will get cooler, drier area in America, for example, and then Asia will be wetter and warmer, and then when they cross over, you'll get wetter and warmer weather patterns over the Asia Pacific, and then you'll get over the Americans, it'll be wetter and warmer. Right, so very easy to get confused with all this. Okay, so these weather patterns come in. It's also worth noting that on the eastern side, they're very susceptible to sea mist because of the temperature and the humidity coming in from the sea. Now, something a lot of people don't realise is this is only 50 kilometres. I touched on this when I was recently in Africa, that we were working 20 kilometres away from the coast. We were living on the coast. And then in the morning, we would be in sub-Sahara, so you go into land 20 kilometres, and the humidity in the morning would be about 70, 80 degrees. By lunchtime, it's down to 20, and then it's back up again through the evening. So even there, where it's borderline desert, you get high humidity spikes in the morning and through the night. So there's actually a 2 degree plus minus difference between the east coast and the west coast, generally, on average. But the humidity difference is vast, okay? So the humidity difference on the eastern side is generally around 80% plus. And that's why you can see the tropical regions of the island are generally on the east side of the mountains. And then where you find these interspersed tropical areas of rainforest, they'll be in like valleys that still get that wind and still get that humidity flow straight in. Now on the western edge, you've got savanna, right? And like I said, it's not savanna like Africa. It's savanna in terms of scrubland, bushes, interspersed trees, no real build-up of vegetation, but open, so airflow flowing through. And generally, the humidity on the western side of the island is around 60, 70 degrees. What else do we need to know before we dig into too much? Okay, the savanna areas are susceptible to fire, okay? Fire is a big risk on the island, but that sort of tells you the dryness of that area that is susceptible to fires. And it was largely formed at the end of the last glacier region around 20,000 years ago, right? Now that's important. Why is that important? Because we know that New Caledonia is separated from Australia between 90 million and 66 million years ago, okay? So the evolution of all of the geckos that come from there are post that split, and evolution is quite a slow process. So although this is savanna now, the animals may have adapted to it but may not have evolved past that, right? So it's just something to bear in mind, right? It doesn't sway the dice either way, but it's just important information to understand. You get a wet season. Wet season is from November to March, right? And then you get high humidity spikes, and the temperature can rise 27 plus. Highest recorded temperature is around 39. Lowest recorded temperature around the mountain areas is sort of 5 degrees, and they do get frost. Your cooler, drier areas are between June and August, and the temperatures will drop down to around 20 to 23 degrees. The east gets most of the rainfall. The west can be up to 3 times drier. And when we look at the rainfall sort of numbers, you're getting 1,500 to 2,000 millimeters on the eastern side, and 1,000 to 1,500 millimeters on the western side. Okay, so we've spoke about the winds, and the winds as they hit the mountains will disperse and break down, lose their power, not drive so much weather across the mountain ranges. So what you find is on the eastern side of the island, it's quite hardy and quite weathered, and a lot of offshore weather formations will hit that eastern side of the island, but they won't necessarily hit the western side. What will happen is it'll break up as it is the mountains, and then the wind will roll down into the valleys. But on the western side, what you get is you get a lot of sea breeze. Now, sea breeze, I've spoke about this before. Sea breeze is a cycle where the land temperature and the water temperature, when there's a difference, it forms a localized wind. So if the land is warmer, so normally sort of midday-ish, when the land warms up and it becomes warmer than the ocean, which has a stable temperature generally, depending on the water current and this effect, but generally that water will stay stable for about 3 months. So in the UK, if you wanted to go into the sea in March, the temperature is still the same as what it was air temperature January, and actually the warmest time or the best time to go in the ocean around the UK is around September, October time, before it starts to cool down. So I digress. Sea breeze. If the water temperature is say 20 degrees and the land temperature is 18 degrees, then the sea is going to be warmer than the land, which means the hot air will rise over the ocean and fall on the land, which will give you an offshore breeze, which will be easterly. Whereas if it's warmer on the land and cooler in the sea, then the air will rise over the land and flow down, giving you an onshore breeze. Okay, so westerly wind. So the west is susceptible to a westerly breeze coming in, and that's again quite important, because that sea breeze is what's aiding this savanna and not building this tropical environment, because it's already got lowish humidity. Okay, so that's what we know from this, and we can see from the distribution of gargoyle geckos that a large portion of their land is this savanna and open scrubland, sparse trees, bushy areas, and very little is in the tropical rainforest. But it's also worth noting that the tropical rainforest itself has microclimates, and this might be of interest to people who keep chahoua, lychees, cresties. Okay. So if we look at a very simple diagram here of a rainforest tree, right? Now the trees in New Caledonia are quite slim. They have a 20 centimetre stem generally, and only reaching a height of sort of around 25 to 30, but most average around 15. Now within that you will have their own microclimates, okay? And we know that people who've been to New Caledonia that they're generally finding cresties in the lower regions, and then chahoua and lychees in the upper regions. Now, what happens under canopy, and if anybody's been to the jungle, which I have a couple of times, you'll know that in the lower canopy or under canopy, in the lower areas of the rainforest, that's where it's the warmest and the most humid. It's dense, it's thick, you get wet through just walking, it's hard to breathe at times. It's pretty miserable, to be fair. And then as you move up through the canopy, the more light that gets shined down, it actually gets you drier and cooler, and there's more airflow because the air will be flowing across the top of the canopy and breaking through into the gaps. So the airflow is more around the top. So you could argue that actually even those the geckos that are found in the more tropical regions or in the rainforested regions, they've got their own microclimate, and we need to understand that to understand what sort of temperatures and variations they need. But again, temperature wise, as long as you're in the same sort of ballpark, which we've talked about, we're talking about 20s, mid 20s, going up into the high 20s in some cases. So temperature wise, that's going to be fine. But I guess what we're really looking at here is the humidity and the environment that they come from. So that's just worth bearing in mind, that animals that come from tropical areas they have their own little microclimates as well. Now there's a lot more we can play into this. We can play into the fact that the soil content is very volcanic, so therefore it has generally it'll have a lot of filtration, natural filtration, so water won't sit. We can talk about the fact that the mountains will collect a lot of moisture, so there will be lots of streams and stuff flowing through. We could talk about the coloration of the geckos and how that can impact, or we can use that information to then assess whereabouts in this sort of climates those geckos come from, because they're masters of camouflage, right? So sort of all that information plays into this as well, but we've got to save something for some more videos later on. So I guess what we've sort of summarized this as a whole is understanding the microclimates of different gecko species, even though they come from the same island, does not necessarily mean that we keep them the same. So, like if you wanted to keep a British adder, right? You're not going to keep one that you've collected in Cornwall that is actually subtropical, believe it or not, versus one that's found in the Scottish Highlands, which is borderline Arctic Circle. Even though that's the same island and they're 1,000 miles apart, like the difference in temperature can be 20 degrees at times. So it's just understanding that those two, one gets warm air currents from the Mediterranean and one gets cold air currents from the Arctic Circle. And although the animal's found in the same landmass, doesn't necessarily mean that its care and keeping is the same. And this is where understanding locales and stuff like that comes into play. So for me now, the next job on this microclimate is to go away and have a look and see where gargoyle geckos were collected from, if we know. I do know the most recent places they've been seen are in the south of the island, southeastern edge, so this sort of area here. So I'm just intrigued now to go away and see what data I can find on where they were collected on this, and then build on this for you. But basically, this is what I mean when I'm talking about microclimates and understanding. And this is why I don't think gargoyle geckos should be kept like crested geckos. Hopefully that's of use to somebody. And thanks for listening. Cheers.